quite reach.
No problem. All right. All right. So I see some people are joining us. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to give it just a minute more for a few more people to join before we get started. Okay. All right. Okay. Welcome everyone. Yeah, I love that we're able to do so much through Zoom now. It's one of the positive outcomes post COVID. And I feel like just looking around at everybody's camera, in the beginning, I think when I first used Zoom, I was all pixelated and I didn't have a good camera. And I'm looking around at everybody, and everyone has very strong cameras. I see good backgrounds, and I see. Uh, I'm looking over. I see Tony's camera's a higher. This is all of the Zoom recommendations that you see online are just automatic now. All right, I might go ahead and get started just so we can uh, have time. As I'm assuming people will still be joining, so I'm going to start off just by saying welcome to everyone. Um, thank you for joining our 1 hour virtual Meet the Candidates session for candidates running for the Multnomah County Commissioner position for District 2. Today, we're welcoming Shannon Singleton here today. So, very excited to have her today. I am the moderator for this session. My name is Julian Thomas. I am an advocacy group member with Impact Northwest. I've supported Impact Northwest in the past through a number of different activities and different engagements. Really passionate about this organization. This is hosted by a number of Portland area nonprofits doing great work in the community. So I want to give special thanks to some organizations as well. Portland Tenants United, Blanchett House, SEI, Northwest Pilot Project, Path Home, Transition Projects, Our Just Future, William Temple House, and the Welcome Home Coalition, and of course, Impact Northwest for hosting this. We're grateful for this opportunity. Through these Meet the Candidate sessions, we hope to engage multiple stakeholders in learning more about each candidate, their backgrounds, and their vision for Multnomah County. As a 501c3 nonprofit, it's important to note that we do not endorse any candidate. We do feel that civic engagement and advocacy for the communities we work in is important. With that, let's set the scene for some ground rules before we go ahead and get started. This is the ground rules slide. So first, all participants, we want to make sure they're treated with respect and we treat others with respect. What that means is biased, racist, homophobic, or any other forms of hate are not tolerated in the space. Microphones are automatically off, so most of you will notice that you are automatically muted. If you raise your hand during the question section or put in comments, we have a number of moderators on the call that can unmute you, and we will invite you to the unmute section, just so we can keep a little bit of structure in the process as we get going. During the Q&A, use the chat for questions, and in terms of raising your virtual hand, all you have to do is click the reaction button, I believe, and that's where you can raise your hand. Also, this event will be recorded. It's currently being recorded, so there you will have access to listen to some of the answers that Shannon has given after this is over. The Shannon's going to have 20 minutes to speak, and then we'll have 30 minutes afterwards, and that's where we'll be having the Q&A session. So with that, I'd love to welcome Shannon Singleton. Thank you for joining us. You now have 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. And thank you for having me. I think those of you in the room who know me, I've already let folks know that 20 minutes is an excessively long time for me to talk. So we'll probably shift into Q&A a little bit earlier, or I may have questions just that I want to pose and hear back from folks who are in the work now, because I've been out of it for over a year now. So I'm Shannon Singleton. My pronouns are she and her, and I am running for Multnomah County Commissioner for District 2 to finish off Sushila Jayapal's term. And I decided to run for the Multnomah County Commission primarily because I'm coming from 30 years of social work and service in the community, not only in the ending homelessness work, but also in moving forward anti-racism and racial equity work, as well as being a trained clinician and providing behavioral health care and understanding where some of those gaps are in our system. I really believe we're at a time where the county, who is our biggest social service provider in the state, has somebody on the commission who has done this frontline work. My top 3 priorities are, of course, housing and homelessness, as well as healthcare, and really looking at safe communities and primarily what that means through some of the criminal justice work of the county. I would say in a close fourth is the work that the county does around transportation and some opportunities that I think we can explore for workforce equity and workforce opportunity for people who are trying to exit our anti-poverty systems and exit homelessness. So as I said, I come from the work most recently having been in Governor Kate Brown's office, so working at the state level, both on housing policy, but eventually moving into work as her director of equity and racial justice. And what that work allowed me to do was really see and understand a lot of the different state investments in all of our social determinants of health. I got to work on education, as well as housing and homelessness, as well as environmental justice and climate justice, and spend some time with criminal justice reform and some of the amazing work that the governor did to issue commutations and pardons that I think we all know, like the marijuana offenses, that continue to impact people's ability to get back inside. So that knowledge and understanding of those connections between the state level and how that impacts at the county and then the community level, excuse me, is something that I want to bring to this work. The past year, I have spent working in transportation. I have been working on some of the big infrastructure projects in our community, including the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge, where we know that there's opportunities for workforce development. We had a recent study that shows us we have a deficit of trained and skilled labor. And I think that's a right opportunity to get some of the folks that you all serve into family wage jobs so that they can move into their own economic self-sufficiency. I know that you all know this, so a little bit of my spiel is going to be preaching to the choir. When we end somebody's homelessness, we don't end their poverty. And I think we can do more to address that component of it through some of the county's other work and their investments in workforce opportunity, not just in the transportation sector, but in additional workforce opportunity investments that they have. I really think that I am the person who can come to this job with a track record of getting things done. While I was at the state, we were able to pass not only unprecedented amounts of rent assistance to deal with the COVID pandemic, but we also were dealing with housing needs of our wildfire victims who were displaced, and did a lot of advocacy to ensure that people who were homeless at the time of wildfires were also able to access the emergency response system and housing assistance to be able to move back into housing. We also, folks may not realize, had some floods in Umatilla that displaced a large number of folks as well. So I got to do some work there to implement some tenant-owned RV developments to really find a space for those folks to be able to relocate and actually have some ownership over their housing as opposed to continuing to be renters. And additionally, passed the first statewide long-term rent assistance. I wrote that bill explicitly to be able to expand both the number of dollars that could go into it, but the population. So it initially was to serve youth exiting foster care and other institutions. But the idea was that the population was the pilot and not that long-term rent assistance was the pilot. We know long-term rent assistance works. We don't need to study that any further. So that is a bill that we have, that we continue to have the ability to advocate for additional funds and populations to be added so that we can be leveraging not just HUD and the federal dollars, but also state dollars as well. I think the other piece around housing or around healthcare in particular and behavioral health, again, having worked on the ground and run the Royal Palm, as well as started the first street outreach, mental health street outreach program, as well as oversaw the clinical services at Bud Clark Commons, the apartments. The first round of folks, I'll never forget my couple of, I think it was a month of every Saturday doing behavioral health assessments with as many people as we possibly could get into our office. That work really helped me see where there's gaps, not only in our system here, but in the Medicaid system at large. So one of the programs that I'm really advocating for that I would want to move forward a policy and budget investment is to actually help us pay for the mental health treatment that folks need before they're able to complete that behavioral health assessment. So really my goal is to look at what are the gaps that I experienced on the ground and how can we shift the way that the county funds our system to address those. I will say the other piece that I know is on folks' radar is the wages of staff. And this is something that I know is not just for ending homelessness work, but I think goes over into our veterans as well as domestic violence and other services that did not see a salary increase that some of the joint office contractors did when I was briefly at the county. So that is something that I know Kim Melton had done some extensive work on. I would like to come back in and pick that up as part of my work as your next county commissioner. I know I'm not near 20 minutes, but I would say I think I kind of shared really what my top issue priorities are and would love to look to either questions. And if not, then I definitely have some questions that I would pose to you all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Shannon. Let's open it up for some questions and answers. So if you could write your questions in the chat or raise your hand using your virtual hand, and we'd be happy to unmute you. All right, give people a second to get those typing fingers moving. Right, I see Mike's hands raised.
Yeah, Shannon, I guess I'll just start with the biggest issue that I'm seeing right now with the commissioners is it seems like the funding is going out a little too slowly for the urgency of the issues that we're seeing, mainly around the homelessness and housing. And so I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on what you would do on board with the new team to sort of get things moving more quickly and you know how you see the problem as it is right now and how you see solutions that could happen quickly and really make an impact.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Mike. You know, I think there's a couple of things that we can look at. One is I know that many folks run out of rent assistance before they run out of folks to serve. And so I think it's really what are the opportunities to move more dollars into programs that we know could spend that money and help get more people inside. I think we also should take a look at our county contracting system. Something that I was advocating for as a provider was moving to a bit of the model that we see in LA, and was just not really getting a lot of traction. But the way that that model is really flipping it so that if I hire a staff for a new program, I receive the money for that staff for the year, as well as the amount of client assistance that that person would need allocated for the number of folks that they're expected to house. So really, instead of that reimbursement model, that upfront cost going to providers so that they're not kind of waiting on that reimbursement structure. I think that actually moves money out of the county and into provider hands more quickly, and it warrants more discussion and evaluation than we have done to date.
Okay, great. We have another question here from Tony. Where has the county gotten it right on the supportive housing services measure implementation? Where has it gotten it wrong? And what do we need to do to ensure that it gets renewed?
Yes. Hi, Tony. Good to see you. Congratulations. I haven't seen you since you moved into this role, so that's awesome. I think that the county has gotten it right in really that expanding of services. Particularly, I appreciated the investments early into culturally specific programming and ensuring that we had the ability to bring more providers into the service system. Additionally, I think we've been able to use dollars, again, while I was my short term as interim director at the county for those 8 months, we purchased a bunch of properties. And part of what I liked about that model was, it's providing shelter opportunities in the short term, but it is a land banking system that really allows us to look at future housing development. I think we could do some more of that, and I would love for us to again, revisit that type of idea. I think where we've gotten it wrong has been really looking at how are we funding the retention system. I still think that is an underfunded component of our work. We'd have the same goals, but we don't actually fund the staffing structure to provide more than sometimes a phone call. And I would like to see us really invest in that, because we know prevention is frankly cheaper than somebody cycling back through homelessness. And I think to get it renewed, we need to show those results. The community wants to understand. They don't necessarily understand every little nuanced detail of our data in this system, but I do think we have to find a way to tell the story of what the effectiveness is and be honest about where we do have deficits. I think the community at large is really looking for that accountability and transparency. I also do think we should give time to the Metro conversation about if things are opportunities to utilize funds for any gap financing. Again, I would say land banking opportunities and not just housing development, and looking at that as an opportunity to extend or eliminate the sunset. I don't want that to just be kind of pushed aside. I know that folks are spending the money. I know that you all are working really hard, and I think there's opportunity there that is worth exploring with Metro. And I think ending the sunset or extending it is a really big deal.
Great, thank you. And Tony, thank you for that question. Tony's coming to us from Transition Projects. The next question we have is from Andy Miller from Our Just Future. Shannon, what are your thoughts on the chair and mayor's proposed homeless response action plan? Given the direction they have articulated, how would you propose influencing and shaping that direction?
Thank you, Andy, and good to see you too. I think the homeless response action plan codifies a lot of things that you all already know are good practice or best practice. I do like setting goals. I don't I will say I don't think that the plan is revolutionary to you all, nor was it to me, but I do like the clear articulation of goals. When I think about how to shape it and influence it, it's really, again, to me, what are the gaps and how are we moving dollars into where you all know that we have gaps in our system and your staff on the front line know that we have gaps. That's still the missing piece for me is, you know, the idea and the plan is great, but when we get to the nuts and bolts of implementation, not all of those pieces are currently funded to the extent that they need to be to actually achieve those goals. And again, I'll come back to retention. I think we set really high retention goals. I think that that's something we all definitely want to achieve, but we have got to be paying you all for staff to go do that work. And that continues to be a big missing component for me in our system. Regarding shelter as well, I think it's really important. I know there's a lot of media attention to Clinton Triangle and the lack of rent assistance dollars out of there. And again, that's not unique to Clinton Triangle, nor new to you all operating shelter programs. And so in addition to the, are we building more shelter, we have to be talking about, are we appropriately resourcing shelter to get folks out of those beds and back into housing. So those are two components that really stuck out for me on that action plan.
Okay, great. All right. And yeah, again, feel free to raise your hands using the reaction button. Oh, I see Andy. Let me pull you off mute, Andy.
Hi, Julian. Hey, everybody. Sorry I was late getting here. Shannon, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your highlighting the need to bring housing wages to our frontline workers. You know, one of the things we've discovered is, you know, and even if we've talked to the elected officials on Multnomah County, there's such a disconnect between that policy wish and actually what happens in the different program offers. Like, I don't think we've seen a program offer yet where that's highlighted. And I'm wondering, just, you know, your thoughts, having been at the joint office, like, how do we actually make this? How do we implement this on kind of that level so that when we're getting folks who are putting programs together, they're thinking about that in their allocation of the monies that they have?
Great question, Andy, and thank you. And thank you for giving your team space to host this. It's a great event. I know it's extra work, so I appreciate it. I think this is something that is bigger than homeless services. So I do think it's a conversation additionally with not even just social service provider. This is something that comes up for a lot of our represented staff as well. The county contracts, for example, janitorial services for a lot of their buildings. And those workers do not receive the same wages as county staff, nor do they receive housing wage job or housing wages either. And so I think there's a, what does it really look like to look more broadly across the county, and what are the policies that need to be implemented that mean touch all subcontracting? So it's not just specifically if the janitors happen to negotiate a certain contract or if you all negotiate a certain salary structure. How do we really take a more holistic approach to that, and how the county subcontracts more broadly? I think that will bring it to a level that doesn't allow commissioners to not pay attention to it. And it requires then a solution that is more broad-based that I think will be more effective.
All right, thank you for that question, Andy. All right. I feel like your answers are so succinct, and you're hitting the point. The answers are coming before the questions.
This
All
is
right.
my style. There's no lollygagging in Philly. You're raised to like get it done and keep it moving.
No worries. Laura has the next question.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, Shannon. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. I think this question, of course, and Laura Galino de Lovato, Northwest Title Project Executive Director, she, her. This question, I think, really applies throughout the county, not just for homeless services. But I think what I've been struck by is the interesting delving of county commissioners into program design and development, as opposed to sort of the high level policy, and a reluctance or lacking of leveraging both expert staff in the county and contracted providers like my colleagues in social services, but throughout the county, in helping the commission design policies and priorities and budget that work. So I'm curious about whether or not that's something that you see, and if it is, how would you, if you're elected to serve on the commission, help move the commission from being so granular and more visionary? Thanks.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And I would say something that I noticed immediately upon entering that interim director role at the joint office, I had a request from commissioners to meet with everybody weekly, which is not the best use of the JOE's director's time. If you think about both the county commission and the city council, that's a lot of meetings going, not to actually doing the work of the director. And I think what I really would want to do is, again, I can help us see as a commission what the impact of our policies might be on the ground. But I think the biggest thing I bring is being a social worker, where we're taught to look at the world, and how I operate in the world is what is centering the people who are most impacted. And so not only you all and your staff, but the clients as well that you're serving, and what are we actually hearing from people on the ground, and how is that informing our policies as opposed to the other way around. There's a lot of expertise at the joint office, and I will say part of my job in my role was to create the space and set up some boundaries for them to be able to do that work. And for them to do that work, I think it means them engaging with you all on a more regular basis. And what I was trying to really work in, I hope that it's happening, was getting back the outreach and engagement work group and the shelter work group and all the different places that there used to be opportunity for frontline staff to influence the policies and how the joint office is running their programs, but frankly then gives us information that can go up to commissioners so that we can actually understand where there might be gaps and right size our budget investments or policy investments. When it comes to budgeting in particular, I really would like to see us do much more of a ground up approach to that, and really, again, where are the gaps and how can we shift funds appropriately so that we are not continuing to let people fall through and just cycle in and out of homelessness. That's the place that I keep getting stuck with the county in particular, is if somebody's in jail and we know that they're homeless, why aren't we connecting the dots for the staff? And why do we have processes and barriers for you all to be able to talk to each other and actually address the issues for that human being, as opposed to saying, well, I can't talk to you because X, Y, Z. So that's where I see us, is how can we cut red tape that we've established through policies we've implemented to get more out of the way for the providers to actually do the work. And again, to your point, sometimes it's county staff, and get out of the way for them to do the work, particularly with our health department, where there's a lot more of county employees actually on the front lines and implementing that.
Thank you for that question, Laura. All right. And again, continue. Feel free to use either the chat to write your questions, or obviously you could raise your hand.
Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question and answer it if you like.
I really want to know kind of what are some of the biggest pain points that folks are experiencing right now with the county, whether that's at the commission level or at the implementation with the joint office level.
All right, we'll start with Andy.
I will try to be succinct and limit it to maybe two. So I think one is, and others have hinted at it, I think we've heard a lot of desire and rhetoric about understanding the financial woes of nonprofits, and in particular, the inability of us to make meaningful impact on frontline staff wages. We haven't seen the implementation. So for instance, this year, there was budgeted a small injection in the form of a financial health grant through the United Way. It took too long to get the money out. It was too small an allocation. We have no clue whether we're getting it next year or if it's even in the budget plans for next year, which means adding it into wages feels fiscally dangerous. So I think that's an example of, if there's unspent money, there's one place we could immediately be injecting money in a more aggressive way, in a more systemic way, and along the lines that have already been endorsed. So I think that's one big pain point. I think the other is, I would articulate it this way. We're the trees in the forest. We look to the county to give us the forest for the trees viewpoint. In terms of data, feedback. I guess what I'd say is, we administer programs, and I think the irony of what we're seeing in homeless services, and this is not unique to Multnomah County, it's national, we're seeing highly effective programs working successfully for a broad number of individuals. They don't aggregate into a systemic impact that the public wants to see and that we want to see. So what aren't we doing that we should be doing? We look to the county to sort of convene us as system implementers. I think there's been a shying away on the part of the county of, well, we want to be very inclusive of all the input, but the last people we really want to hear from are the people implementing our dollars. They come last, or we'll ask them as an afterthought. And the irony is, we have this Monday meeting that's an ad hoc meeting of implementers, and some of the Joe's leadership comes to that occasionally. They don't convene that. Why would you not want the leadership of your implementation agencies to speak to you on a regular basis, not just to tell you how it's going? I think, as you know, as an implementing agency, we have a hard enough time getting our own data out of the system to understand what impact we are and aren't having. What we never see is the aggregated data. So if we're going to cut unsheltered homelessness in half in 2 years, how are we going to convene to assess our progress on that? And in some ways, I guess I would say, course correct along the way. Because if what we are doing looks successful to us as each individual implementer, but it's not aggregating into systemic impact, someone's got to tell us why, and what is the data showing? We know it's really hard to get someone in shelter into housing. How do we sit with the leadership of the housing system and smooth that path? I guess there's just so many pain points along the way that I would broadly say is, we don't feel like we are part of a system. We feel like we're running individual programs as individual contractors, and we are not leading the implementation of a systemic approach. And we can help a lot of people. We can build a lot of programs. We can build a lot of, in our case, build a lot of housing. We don't know how to be moving that in the direction of creating the systemic impact that the system would like to have. So I would say, for me, that's the big one.
Great. Shannon, do you want to comment on Andy's question before moving to Laura? And then I'm seeing we're starting to get a few more questions rolling in the chat as well.
I don't think there was a question for me there, but I do appreciate what you're saying. And I think that's one of the pieces that I would love to see, is really, how do we think about data and evaluation at a broader level? I actually think we have not done a good job of partnering with HRAC, where there is a wealth of resource that could really help us understand that more systemic level data that I would love for us to take a look at. And I think that there's ways that we can really improve that, that it's not all internal to the county. I think additionally, and you all are well aware, is how can we break down the silos even internally in the county around data? The fact that anti-poverty system data is here and then homelessness data is here as if never the twain shall meet is just ludicrous. And that's something that I think we could change pretty quickly internally at the county. I will say I'm disappointed to hear that some of the system meetings that I had requested start happening while I was at Joe's didn't. And it would absolutely be something that I would advocate for as a commissioner and really look to move, because I think it's the reason that we got to even be able to get something like SHS passed was that we were all regularly convening and talking about what was going on the ground and what the data looked like and how money was spending, what was successful, and doing a lot of shared learning. And not having that is a huge detriment to the folks that we serve. So that would absolutely be something that I would look to re-implement.
All right. Laura?
Thanks, Shannon. This question is, or this comment is really to your question about pain points. And Andy talked about it a little bit, you talked about it a little bit, but it's really the pain point that I feel most frequently throughout the county, not just the joint office, but from the chair's office, from overall, is communication, is just a lack of a robust, ongoing communication system that allows us as providers, and in a way us as community members, to hear about what's going on, to get updates, and to be able to then have that back and forth. And that's everything from you know, what is going on with shelters when there's really cold weather, and how frequently the page on the county website is being updated to what other things are being done. And I think that the county hit a really high point of excellent communication during the pandemic, because public health really stepped up and was really doing some great communication. And so I would say that for me is what I see as a pain point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I know that that's something that's been a little bit longer term than it should be. And that I think links so much to some of what Andy was saying as well. So I really appreciate you uplifting that. And I think to Julian's point earlier, we're so far into technology at this point, we've got to be able to crack this nut and really be able to communicate on a more regular basis. Again, if we were having some of these systems meetings and these conversations, that would be a great conduit for that to happen. So I think that would be the first step for me, and then really understanding what are the next steps. And I think as commissioners, we can really look to support the directors of the departments to help distill anything we're sharing, so that yes, every commissioner does their own kind of newsletter and update, but I'm not going to pretend y'all have the time to read 5 newsletters every month to see who's thinking what about homeless services. So I think there's something to be discussed there on how we maybe shift that approach.
All right. The next question we have is from Molly Hogan with Welcome Home Coalition. She asked, how would you support a move away from criminalizing homelessness and prioritizing shelter spending over housing first, temporary solution versus long-term as policy response we are seeing regionally and nationally as a county commissioner?
Thank you, Molly. I think, one, I don't support criminalization. I was a party to the lawsuit that successfully barred the city from implementing their policy. I think that it does nothing to address homelessness, and it's not something that I support as a policy direction around ending homelessness. I really think when it comes to this, I I'm frustrated that we're getting pulled into this trap again around shelter versus housing. It's a false dichotomy. We need both. We know that we need spaces for people to safely enter and get off the streets. We know that sometimes that's moving right into housing. Sometimes that's moving into shelter. Sometimes that's a detox or sobering center. Sometimes it's recovery treatment. I think we need to really be thinking about investing appropriately in all of those services so that we ensure people aren't widgets, right? I know it's going to take everybody's path back in is going to look different. And really what I want to see is how are we ensuring that we're keeping focused on the reality that only housing is the solution to homelessness. These other treatment models are solutions to different problems. They're solutions to being unsafe on the street. They're solutions to having untreated addictions or mental illness, but people are still homeless when they are in these systems. And so we have got to keep our eye on that long-term goal. And I think Andy mentioned what are some of the barriers that people have to getting in and how do we address some of the screening challenges that people have. But also,
I'm seeing a frozen on my end. Is anyone else seeing that? Okay. Let's give Shannon a second to come back. Let's see. Okay. Thanks for the thumbs up. I'm like, am I the one frozen? Sometimes that's the case. Yeah, let's give Shannon a minute. Let me see if I can. Maybe we can write to her directly, just in case she's still talking. And I see a few more questions rolling in. So the order I have them in right now is got Molly, is your hand raised based on her response right now? Okay, great. So might have you comment after when we get Shannon back, and then I've got Brenda, a comment from Andy, and then Mercedes. All right, I see Shannon hopping back in right now.
thank
Perfect.
you. I'm so sorry about that. I have no idea. My computer just decided not to be on anymore, even though it's fully charged. So I apologize for that. And thank you for unmuting me. Sorry, Molly. So I think where I might have dropped out was really just that we have to both address that housing development need and these other sort of treatment services, but I really don't want to, excuse me, get stuck in this false dichotomy around shelter and housing, and really would look to bring a, we need to be investing in the things that folks on the ground need. And when they tell us that they continue to need shelter and they need treatment and they need these sobering centers, then we have got to be responsive to that as county commissioners. And if I missed anything, please let me know.
I believe Molly might have had a follow-up question from that. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, you unmuted me. Thank you, Julianne.
Perfect.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I'm in no way want my question to support a dichotomy between shelter and housing, that we need both. But what we're seeing is this really prioritization, right? When we look at the SHS spending, recently I saw a presentation where the shelter goals had met the goals over 100%, and the rapid rehousing and permanent supportive goals were under 50% met of the goals. So I just think, you know, budgets are documents of prioritization, right? Like what we're focusing on. And so just the energy around like you know, criminalization is a tactic around that too, right? Like just erasing people visually from the streets, when really we know that housing, even like true housing first, where people get the support they need, plus the housing works and people can stay housed. Even just it's this dangerous narrative happening that a lot of people are quote unquote unhousable, right? Due to addiction or mental health challenges. And that's just absolutely not true. And so just, just how as a leader supporting a movement away from that super dangerous narrative and towards the humanizing of people experiencing homelessness, and that people are housable and want housing and just don't have access to it. And so what are prioritizing those pathways that are longer term solutions versus spending millions and millions on a bunch of mass shelters that people don't want to stay in because congregate shelter doesn't work for the majority of folks, and they prefer their autonomy of living outside in a tent, minus the cold weather emergencies. So that's what I meant. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't take yours to be like, this is a real dichotomy that we should support. I took it as a, where do you stand on this? And so really for me, I think, again, I don't believe in housing ready. I believe in evidence and data. You know, I started social work and homeless services when it was a step system. You come into shelter, it's clean and sober. You prove that you can handle this, and then we move you to transitional housing, and then you prove you can handle that, and now you're ready for an apartment on your own. And housing first, at first to me, I was like, this sounds bananas. And then I did my research, and I spent the time to understand what it was as a young social worker and how effective it was. I think the reality for Portland is we have had very little opportunity to actually implement housing first to its true fidelity. This is probably the only group I will get that nerdy with, because I say that and my campaign team is like, please don't talk to people about fidelity of models. But I think that's really one of the things that we haven't done. And that's where I see the additional investments in the behavioral health that we've been lacking to really have those support services. Again, you all know that it takes the idea of sitting down with me when I first meet you to do a 2 to 3 hour behavioral health assessment, and you're in crisis mode trying to survive in the streets or in a shelter, is absolutely ludicrous. And without that, Medicaid is not going to then pay for my services with you. We have to fill that funding gap. And I think that's something we can do with SHS and actually be able to provide true housing first models.
Great. So it looks like we have a handful of questions left. We've got about 10 minutes left. So we'll test your superpower, Shannon, of these succinct answers that you've been really knocking out the park. So the next question is from Brenda. Interested in your thoughts around HRAP. I think that might be referring to Homeless Response Action Plan, or is that right? Okay. And then is it addressing the concerns the public wants to see, or is it recognizing the needs of the organizations it's contracting with?
Yeah, so I think this one I think is similar to another question earlier. So I will say I do think it's, again, the really good goals that are being set and having some plans pulled together into one that we all know are effective on the ground. But then the question becomes, how does implementation and funding actually happen? And that's really where I want to see investments going, again, to where we just talked about with mental health, but also retention more broadly, which I will say, again, includes some mental health trained staff, whether they're peers or clinicians or both, to really provide that kind of wraparound support services and retention support services. I think that we're very good at making plans. This is not the first plan that I've encountered in my time. I think we were still in the 10-year plan to end homelessness when I first moved to Portland. And I do like that this plan has ambitious goals as opposed to what we did with the 10-year plan, which was a lot of achievable goals that we would blow out of the water every year. But what I'd like to see is how are we actually engaging you all and additional providers outside of this network, our health system providers, to ensure that we're able to actually be successful here and put the funds, because I agree, Molly, budgets are moral documents, and where we put our funds is really important. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect the results to be different. So we clearly have to be investing differently. And I think, again, shelters warrant some conversation. What is the shelter type that is really being the most successful? And how do we support providers if we need to do some conversions into doing so, so that we're able to operate shelters that are really effective for people as a pathway out of homelessness and not necessarily getting stuck.
We have a few comments, it looks like more geared toward the pain points question. One from Andy, just sometimes it feels that the county forgets the community-based nonprofits are the backbone of the social safety net. And then one from Mercedes, we need a better balance between compliance and achieving outcomes. We're hammered on outcomes, but the majority of reporting is focused on compliance. I think this attitude also encourages silos. It's easy to control complaints in smaller and closed systems. So those are a couple comments. And then there was a question here from Sisters of the Road Administrative. Curious what your stance is regarding safe use sites. And that might be the last question here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much for this question. We were talking about safe use sites, I would say about 7 years ago, as some of a couple of providers, Michael Bonacore, when he was at the helm of Home Forward, myself and some folks at Central City Concern. And I'm a little disappointed that we haven't had political will to really have that conversation more broadly and seek to implement something. I would say we have an overdose crisis on our streets. And the solution to an overdose crisis very well may be safe use sites. So I would really like us to have an honest conversation about that. Again, this is something that has evidence in its successful ability to engage people, not only to prevent overdoses, but to engage people in longer term treatment through that ability to develop trusting relationships in a safe environment. I know that it can be unpopular for folks who maybe don't understand it, but I think that as elected leaders, we have to be willing to have those uncomfortable or unpopular conversations. So that is absolutely something that I would like us to be discussing for our community to address. What we're seeing is just these mass amounts of overdoses on the streets and in a lot of your settings.
All right. Well, we're at the 55. So I want to say thank you everyone for all of these really great questions and engagement. Thank you for answering all of these questions so succinctly, Shannon, and your time today. I want to leave just a few more minutes. One, if you have any final words you'd like to share, and if there is a way either through email or a site to get more questions answered if people have additional questions that they weren't able to ask in this medium.
Absolutely. I will drop my email in the chat here. Please do feel free to send additional questions or to reach out if you want to have a conversation. I'm happy to hop on a call or grab a coffee, time permitting. If we're doing that, I will just acknowledge I have to continue to work full time. So my during the workday schedule looks a little bit chaotic, but I'm always open to something after hours if that works for people as well. I think really what I'd like to leave folks with is that I really think I'm the best person for this job. I'm the only candidate in the race who has actually not only experienced homelessness, but also has worked on the front lines. And that perspective has been missing from the county commission for far too long. And I think it's really led to where we are today, where we've got such a disconnect between what providers and people on the ground need and what the county commission is discussing. This is my wheelhouse, but I would say in addition to housing and homelessness, I've worked in all the other county services, including at this point, transportation. I would say the only would be libraries that I haven't worked with. And they're doing a lot of the work that we're doing with connecting people to resources and having a safe space for them. So I think really I'm coming to this work and coming to this race with the experience on the ground and the drive to make changes that we really know can impact the folks that continue to struggle in our programs and out there on the streets. And I apologize for the tech snafu, but hopefully I didn't miss too much and was able to get responses to your questions.
I don't think you missed anything. So, thank you so much, Shannon, for this. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Shannon, for giving us the opportunity to hear more about your position. Thanks for dropping your email in the chat, info@shannonsingleton.org. We will make sure that this recording is available following this session. And everyone, really have a great day, and thank you for spending this time with us so we could learn a little bit more from Shannon Singleton in our Meet the Candidate session today. All right. Have a good rest of the day.